Hey guys, welcome to another video, Purple Political Talk here, and today we're going to be looking at the 2020 senatorial elections, going through filling in our map with information, data, and statistics that we do have to try to accurately predict this senatorial races. So before we begin, I wanted to remind you guys to please like and subscribe and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So let's get started. And we're gonna begin by filling in our safe Democratic states. So the Democrats had a huge advantage when it comes to this map. Not only they would be starting with more safe states, but the Republican have a lot of states that should not be contested being contested, and that's an important thing to note. The Democratic Party is being able to hold on to some of these states by safe margins. And that sounds like no-brainer. Safe states, they have to go by safe margins. But at this point in time, states that would be considered safe for the Republicans in other levels, right now the Republicans are not going to hold them or win them by those same margins. We're going to get into those states when we do specific analysis on those states right now in this video. Right now the Republican Party is just at a huge disadvantage just because of many major reasons, including, COVID-19 and its effects, and the Republican popularity has just been sinking a lot. So, it's going to be hard for them to try to come back and actually take over the majority in the Senate. Is it completely impossible for them? No. But the map is looking worse and worse every day. Considering that the Republican Party, especially in the Senate, have been told to distance themselves from Trump, that does not paint a good picture for a lot of these Senate races. So, this is our safe state. So, we can see there's some notable omissions for the Republican Party. We're going to talk about those right now. So, as we fill in our likely Republican states. So, like I mentioned, there are some states that are no longer in the safe column for the Republican Party. Most importantly, Mississippi, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Alaska. So, these are right now the only races that are going by likely margins for the Republican Party, and I'm going to explain each of them. So, let's begin with the race in South Carolina. So, we have Lindsey Graham there. He is an incumbent U.S. Senator. He's a part of the Republican establishment. He's been there for a long time, and he's become one of the establishment senators for the GOP. Now, he's going against Jamie Harrison, which he's an African-American candidate, which really does bring a lot of support, especially amongst Black South Carolinians, which is a group of voters that Democrats need to win if they want to make this race contested. Now, African-American turnout will definitely be high this election, just because of all the issues with COVID-19 and things like that, and minorities are communities that are being hit the most. So, Jamie Harrison, he's going to close up the margin. Nonetheless, he's probably not going to win the election as a whole. Lindsey Graham, he's like a Mitch McConnell, which we'll get to his race right now. But in the sense that he's unpopular, but he just gets reelected just because he is Lindsey Graham and he's been there for a long time. So that's what I think about the South Carolina Senate race. And polling has Lindsey Graham ahead by somewhat of a large margin, so that's pretty good for him. When it comes to the state of Kentucky now, I feel like honestly this race could be a lot more contested, but I feel like the candidate the Democrats chose is a good one. Nonetheless, it's probably not going to be enough. So, in this race, you have incumbent Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell going against Amy McGrath. She was a former fighter pilot, and she ran for Congress in 2018. She lost her race to Representative Andy Barr. So, right now, it's a race that, honestly, the Republican Party is going to have to focus on this race. If the Senate Majority Leader loses their seat, that's going to look pretty embarrassing. So, the Republican Party is pushing a lot of resources into this race. Mitch McConnell has a pretty good lead, considering that his races are always close. I think he right now is going to win by around 6%. And what really could change this race is essentially the teachers in Kentucky. So, there is a big market or a big amount of educators in the state of Kentucky. And I want you guys to remember that in 2008, I think it was 2019, incumbent governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, won his race just because he got the teacher support and educator support because the Republican Party wanted to cut something. So, as long as Mitch McConnell doesn't do something crazy like that, he should be winning here and by a comfortable margin. And out of the state of Mississippi, we have Cindy Hyde-Smith, incumbent U.S. Senator, going against a rematch against Mike Epps. So, this race is also very interesting in the sense that Cindy Hyde-Smith, she's not extremely sky-high popular, but I mean, she's not unpopular. So this is our rematch to the 2018 special election with Cindy Hyde-Smith and Mike Epstein. So right now, Cindy Hyde-Smith is probably going to she's probably going to win, but just consider that African American support might be behind Mike Epstein, which could make the race less than 15%. Is it going to go to Mike Epstein? Probably not. Nonetheless, I think that he does still have a chance to at least carry around or lose by around 10 or 15%, which shows the Democratic gains in the South. And last but not least, in our likely states for the Republican Party, we have the state of Alaska. So this Senate race is also very, very interesting, considering that Alaska is just a very bizarre state when it comes to politics. So, I mean, this race is between incumbent Dan Sullivan, so he's incumbent U.S. Senator. He beat a Democrat for his first election. Now he's going for his first re-election term. And he's going against Al Gross. So Al Gross is an independent / Democrat. So essentially what's going to happen is that he's an independent, but he's running with the Democrats. So here's the thing in Alaska. It's a very bizarre state just because of the third party politics. So right now there's a big movement against the third party, against Alaska's Republican Party. So the third parties are rallying behind the Democratic Party, in this case Al Gross, to try to win the race. So I mean, Al Gross is probably not going to win. Nonetheless, I mean, he's going to do something pretty big. I think this race could even go down to like 6 to 7 points, but I think at the end of the day it's going to come down to like around 10%, which is the ballpark margin that we have. So those are all our Republican likely states. And let's move on to our Democratic likely states. So as we can see, this map is heavily favoring the Democratic Party, just off of the safe. If they win all of the likely states that I'm considering likely at this point, they already have, I think, the same majority, the same number of seats they have right now, which, I mean, wouldn't be that bad for them. So what do we have here? So first we have Colorado, the Rust Belt, and the state of New Hampshire. So going on to the state of Colorado, this state is pretty much a suburban state. It's all based around Denver. And the fact of the matter is suburbs are turning Democratic. But that's not the thing that's going to flip the election here. What's really doing the things for the Democrat here is the candidate choice. So I mentioned that poor candidate choice is one of the things the Republican Party is dealing with. I mean, and they really couldn't decide the candidate, but this incumbent, so in this case Cory Gardner, he's made himself so unpopular because he consistently votes with the president in a state that voted against the president. So right now we have John Hickenlooper. He is the former governor of Colorado. He is a very popular guy, and he's running for the Senate, and he's expected to win. I mean, he's probably going to win there by around 5 to 10 points, and Cory Gardner is probably going to have to pull off some miracle to win here. I mean, is it possible for him to win? Yeah, I mean, all these races are possible, I would say, to flip, unless they're in a safe margin. Nonetheless, I mean, it's going to be a tough uphill battle for Cory Gardner to win this race. When it comes to Minnesota and Michigan, I feel like they're two very similar cases. So in Minnesota, you have Tina Smith. He's going against Lewis, who is a candidate for the Republican Party. She's leading constantly in polls by 9%, and she's just very popular in the state, similar to Gary Peters. And this race is against John James, who is a rising star in the Republican Party. So he is actually a very good candidate, I would say. But Michigan is trending Democratic, and Michigan voters do not want Republicans at this point. They served a Republican governor for a long time, so those things really do not help. So in Michigan and Minnesota, one thing that we're seeing is that Democratic support is sky high. And we have incumbents, Tina Smith and Gary Peters, who are holding on to their seats most likely, and probably going to win by similar margins of around 10%. And last but not least, for Democratic likely states, we have the state of New Hampshire with Jeanne Shaheen. And this race shouldn't be contested at all. I mean, it's going to be in the likely margin. Nonetheless, it's probably not going to be a big chance of flipping towards the Republican Party. Is it still possible? Yes. Nonetheless, I mean, Jeanne Shaheen is just so popular that the chances of her losing there are pretty low. So those are all our likely states for both the Democrats and the Republicans. Now we're going to move on to our Democratic lean states. So, I mean, as of right now, there is a couple. I mean, right now, some of these Senate races that a lot of people used to consider they were in the lean column, in the Till column, or even the Republican Till column also are now moving into the Democratic lean column. So these races specifically are Arizona, North Carolina, and Maine. So these races could have been considered for the Republicans. But I mean, Democrats just have so much support here. So we have Arizona with Mark Kelly going against incumbent Martha McSally. Again, another very unpopular incumbent. And Mark Kelly is just a very good candidate, and he's a perfect candidate for the state of Arizona. He's moderate, and all these different things are helping him. He's constantly leading in polls. He's outraising Martha McSally, which really does help. And I think he easily could win there by around 3 to 5 points. When it comes to North Carolina, it's another state that's pretty much above polling that we've seen consistently leading for the Democratic Party, as well as very good fundraising numbers. So Cal Cunningham, he's currently a state representative in the state of North Carolina. He's running for Senate, for the U.S. Senate. The chances of him winning here are quite high, considering that all these different things are polling and fundraising, all these different things are pointing the finger at him to win the race. And considering that Tom Tillis is somewhat unpopular and all these different things, I mean, Cal Cunningham has a pretty good chance of winning this race there, which really is a good thing for the Democratic Party, as this really just adds on. And the Democratic Party before the pandemic, I would say, the chances of the Senate weren't super high, but now that we're seeing a lot of these different things happen, the chances are getting super high, and they're the favorites to take over the Senate. Now, out of the state of Maine, we have Sarah Gideon and Suzanne Collins. Suzanne Collins is the most unpopular senator in the United States, almost as equally unpopular as Mitch McConnell, and it really does not help her. I mean, she used to be one of the most approved of senators in her constituents, in the eyes of her constituents, just because she was so bipartisan. She started to leave the bipartisanship out the window, and now she's pretty much voting consistently with the Republicans in a kind of Democratic state. I mean, this state couldn't be considered solidly Democratic, but it has a big Democratic base. Sarah Gideon, on the other hand, is very popular. She is the Speaker of the Maine House, campaigning, all these sort of things. A lot of people think she has a lot of charisma, and that really does help her in this race, especially when you're trying to be a very unpopular incumbent. So these three races are very similar, that incumbents, not the most popular ever, and very good candidates running in the Democratic eyes. So that really does help them. And all the three candidates are fundraising a lot of money. So those are all our lean states for the Democratic Party. Let's move on to our lean states for the Republican Party. The Republicans have a couple. I mean, at this point in time, there's some of these races that could be considered more than lean, some less, but there's only three, I would say, essentially. So we have Texas, Georgia, and both races in Georgia. So Georgia, it has 2 Senate races. So we have a regular Senate election, which was up this time around between David Perdue and Jon Ossoff. So I think this race is going to end up going down to around 3 to 5 points, probably more in the 5-point range. And I mean, Jon Ossoff is going to put up a fight. Nonetheless, I don't think he's going to end up winning by like a huge margin. But I mean, it's Georgia, and any lead or any close race here for the Democrats is good, especially in the eyes of future trends. And I think, honestly, David Perdue he has a huge chance of winning here, just considering how popular Republicans are, like establishment Republicans like him are in the state of Georgia. Now, there is minorities and other things like that, but that wouldn't come into play too much in these Senate races until they come up for re-election, like I think the Johnny Isakson seat in 2022, which would be a re-election of Georgia's special election. So this race is going to be very contested, and the interesting thing about this, it's a jungle primary. So on one side you have Lieberman and Warnock for the Democrats, the major candidates, and then you have Loeffler and Collins in the Republican side for the jungle primary. So the way this works is the 2 top earning candidates will go on to a runoff. And right now, who are the 2 candidates that are leading? Well, it's Kelly Loeffler, the current incumbent, and challenger Doug Collins, a U.S. House Representative member who wants to win the Senate seat. So right now in the polls and things like that, Kelly Loeffler she's in the most recent polls, she's leading, but Doug Collins is still ahead in JSK forecast and other forecasts. So right now, this race, I'm going to say it will go it would go to a runoff between both Republican candidates, considering the fact that the Democratic candidates are not that strong. So, Kelly Loeffler and Doug Collins, I think it's going to be a Republican hold, but I think it's going to be a little tight, the race. So I think that it's really hard to tell, because Doug Collins, he is the favorite to win, but Kelly Loeffler is also an incumbent, and she's not as unpopular, but she still does have some popularity. So I think at the end of the day, Doug Collins is probably going to win this Senate seat. When it comes to the runoff, by around maybe 3 to 5 points, which is good for him. So, and then in the state of Texas, we have M.J. Heger going against incumbent John Cornyn. I mean, Texas has been a state where it's going to be pretty hard to tell where it's going to lie in this presidential election. Some recent polling has Biden ahead, but not the same thing in the Senate race for the Democrat. I mean, MJ Heger, she is not a Beto or work candidate. She's not going to go out and flip some of these super rural counties. That's not going to happen. Now, I mean, John Cornyn is somewhat more unpopular than Ted Cruz, and MJ Heger is probably not going to win and beat John Cornyn. John Cornyn is probably going to narrowly hold on, probably around 5 points, which again, pretty good development for the Democrats in the state of Texas. So those are all our lean states for both sides of the aisle. Let's go on to our tilt states. So at this point in time, I'm just going to make a clarification. So Kansas, I'm putting it in the tilt column, not because it's probably going to go tilt for the Democratic Party, but it's because of the uncertainty. So this race is going to be hard to predict until we know who the primary winner for the Republicans is, and that's actually happening this next Tuesday. So what's going to happen here? We have Kris Kobach, very unpopular guy in the state of Kansas. He used to be Secretary of State. He is very unpopular that he lost his governor's race in 2018 to a Democrat by around 2%, which is pretty bad considering the state of Kansas. And the other option is Doug Marshall, who is he's a representative right now, and he probably has a nice chance of winning there. But now, here's the thing. The Republican Party is going to have a problem. They choose Kris Kobach, they're probably going to lose the race. They choose Doug Marshall, the race is probably going to be safe. So, right now, they're also going against Barbara Bollier, the Democrat. She's a conservative Democrat, quote unquote. She's more on the conservative end of the party, and all these different things, which really does help her in a state like Kansas. So, again, it really does depend. So, Kris Kobach's the nominee, Bollier wins. If Doug Marshall's the nominee, Doug Marshall wins. So, that's the state of Kansas. I just wanted to clarify. And then the last two states are Montana and Iowa. So, right now, these two states are one for the Democrats, one for the Republicans. So, I'm actually going to say right now that these races are going to be the closest in 2020. Montana and Iowa. So, in Montana, you have a Senate race which between Steve Bullock and Steve Daines. So, Steve Bullock is incumbent governor of Montana, who is running for Senate this time around, and he's going against incumbent U.S. Senator Steve Daines from the state of Montana. So, I'm going to compare this race a little bit to the Florida Senate race in 2018. It's the same thing, but the parties, the roles of each party are flipped. So, on one side, like in 2018 in the Florida race, we had a not unpopular, but not popular incumbent in Steve Daines in this case. So in 2018 in Florida, it was Bill Nelson, and a popular governor in this case, Steve Bullock. In Florida's case, Rick Scott went and challenged the race. So in Florida, Rick Scott ended up winning, and I think that's going to be pretty similar because Steve Bullock is just super popular. And out of people that live in in Montana, I've heard a lot of people say that a lot of people are voting Trump Bullock, which is good for the Democrats, showing that in some of these states where down ballot voting is not such a common thing, they have good chances of getting some of these races. Steve Bullock, I think, is going to end up winning just because he has a lot more money right now in the bank, and that gives him a lot more resources, and he's just more popular. And last but not least, we have the state of Iowa and its Senate race, and this race is going to be interesting to watch. And right now, it's between Teresa Greenfield and Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst, I feel, is going to pull it out narrowly, just because she has a lot of the rural vote, which is a big majority of the vote in Iowa. Nonetheless, I mean, Teresa Greenfield, if she's able to bring up the African-American margins into areas like Des Moines, she's probably going to do very well. Now, I mean, I'm a little skeptical of calling it for Greenfield at this time, Nonetheless, I think Joni Ernst will narrowly pull it out in this race, and it would be a very good victory for Joni Ernst and the Republican Party. Our final prediction for the 2020 Senate elections is 48 Republicans to 52 Democrats. And this map looks very interesting, as maybe a couple months ago we would have said Republicans losing the Senate impossible. And I'm talking about like January or February, where the map wasn't looking as favorable for the Democratic Party. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like and subscribe, and turn on post notifications to get notified when I post my next video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye.